Hello and welcome to episode number 197 of the ETPHD team podcast with myself and Anna. Hi Anna, how are you?
Hello, I am really well, thanks. How are you?
I'm also really well, thanks. And Georgia, how are you?
Also really well, thanks. How are you?
Oh, great. Well, what a team we are. This is rare that we're all buzzing off our tits to be here.
Oh, well.
I mean, what a win for the middle of the week.
I know. I did just get my eyebrows threaded and tinted, and then I had 10 minutes before the podcast and I got home and I thought, I've got time to just like get myself together. And then I looked in the mirror like, oh my word, it was like I had just slugs across my head. The dye had obviously gone up into my forehead a little bit, and so I was just rushing around. So if I've got like sluggy eyebrows, it's just for today.
Not at all. Not at all. Do you know what? I actually have to warn the beautician when I go, because I'm like, oh yeah, my skin goes really red. It's not like allergy, it's not anything bad, it's just they just go bright red, and then they're like, yeah, that's fine, and then they do it and they're like, oh, you weren't wrong. I'm like, yeah.
Panicking. I always cry when I get stuff threaded as well. I'm always like, I'm fine, it's just a natural response, I'm not upset, I'm not in pain. And every single time they're like, oh, do you want to stop? I'm like, no, keep going. Yeah, so
Is it just your eyes water? Because mine used to water loads when I had them threaded, but it wasn't that it was painful, it's just that my eyes would stream, I guess, because you're so close to like where your eyes are.
What else would water if it's not
Nose?
just
Like runny nose? I don't know. Tickly nose.
I don't know what else, maybe. Okay, before we start, just a heads up, don't listen to nutrition advice from like podcasts that are not nutrition podcasts. Even nutrition podcasts, a lot of them are crap, obviously not us. But the most recent podcast from Diary of a CEO, again, I have no ill feelings towards podcasts. I think he has some great guests on there. I don't personally listen to it so much anymore because of the nutrition quality of nutrition stuff on there is getting worse and worse and worse. And it sounds like it's peddling, like trying to peddle some narrative about a dietary pattern that maybe the host likes or that all of his guests seem to promote. And it's a shame because he has such good guests on there and he's had good fitness and health guests on there too. But just recently, the nutrition stuff is so awful. I think I like to listen to the full episode before I know that I'm going to get questions on it. So I listened to the full episode of it this morning, and they were talking about like one of the clips I think they shared is how your midsection is directly the amount of fat you store on your midsection is related to the size of your brain as you get older, and your brain shrinks as your belly gets bigger or something like that. It was something really obscure, and other like just I would say 90% of what's in that most recent podcast in terms of nutrition advice is wrong. And I had a conversation with Rosalind about this because she was like, I'm just trying to explain it to someone because I've already had some questions, and it's like at some point it's like the burden needs to be on the person to prove what they are saying. Now, science doesn't prove anything ever, and if someone ever says science is proving something, they don't know what they're talking about. But we can't spend our entire lives like saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. We can only spend our lives trying to put out good quality information. But so much of this, what this guy was saying was like, I'm not a nutrition professional. No, I'm not an academic. But I got in to study something at uni, sports science or something at uni. So, I do understand some things.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah, it's like, okay, great. Now I really trust your scientific rigor. And then goes on to talk about how rat studies, and using rat studies as an example of what humans should then do. And then not just humans, what women then do, who respond differently to men, who respond differently to rodents. It's just wild. Like the quality of that was shocking. I actually laughed in the introduction, and I laughed at multiple points out because I was so like flabbergasted at just the audacity of misinformation. So that I just wanted to say that because I'm sure we will get some questions on this one, and that's most of my opinion on most of what they say. Anyone that says red meat is not associated with ill health outcomes long term is generally someone to be skeptical of. especially processed meat, which he didn't actually say that, but he is very much pro eating lots of red meat, which is generally a red flag. Okay, that's all I had to say on that podcast. Let's move on. Georgia, do you want to go first on the questions?
Thank you. Okay. Any tips for handling nervousness when having a job interview? I know I'm capable and have the right experience. I prep and think through all my examples, but when it comes to it, I get so worked up and nervous. I worry my brain will just go to scrambled egg and I won't be able to remember anything, which has happened to me before when I panic. That is one of Becca's clients' questions.
Oh, I feel like I can 100% relate to this in the past. Can you guys? It's like 100%. I remember getting so stressed out about my final year exams. It's one of the reasons I took a year off my final year exams, that I went into an exam and I could not have studied anymore if I possibly tried. Like people, I had like books that I'd created that were all color coordinated. I was proper A-type about it. And like people in my class would borrow them, and I was so like prepped. And I went into multiple exams and just couldn't remember a single thing. Got a 2-1, should definitely have got a first. I was traumatized. I use that word very lightly, and it was awful. And it was because I was so, again, as much as this word we're throwing around so much at the moment, like dysregulated, I was so terrified and nervous that it completely threw me. I've done job interviews around those times too, where I just would go in and I would just sweat through my clothes and I would just forget the most basic stuff. Once I remember I was doing a VO2 max test, which is like a test of aerobic capacity that you do as a physiologist, and I was doing it at a really elite level of job at the time when I thought I wanted to work in elite sport, and I was getting kind of assessed for my skills before I went and did it with other people. And I took a blood sample from this person's ear, and I was so nervous that I threw the glass blood sample across the floor, and it just smashed into smithereens, like across the floor and the wall. And obviously that was his blood sample ruined, and that was me showing my ability, which was something I could have done with my eyes closed, but I was so nervous and so sweaty that I couldn't cope. So 100% relate. And how I got over it is maybe not how I would recommend you necessarily get over it now, but some things that I did was just put myself in more and more and more and more uncomfortable situations. I think it was at that point that I started doing my exercise to music qualification.
Sorry.
I know. Can you imagine me doing that? But it was so like far removed from what I was comfortable with, which is just teaching aerobics classes. Because I'm so uncoordinated. The examiner was like, your arms are just flailing around. And I was like, that's just what my arms do. Like I have long, lanky arms. And I hated it every single time I did a class. I was so nervous. But you can't mess up when you're going like 100 miles an hour in front of 40 women or people, usually women in that class, and doing an aerobics class. You don't have an option but just to do it. So I did a lot of things like that where I just really like put myself in really uncomfortable situations. I also gained weight, which I think helped a lot. I think when I was at that time, I was very underweight. I had HA at that time as well, and I was very regimented in everything that I did, and I was very focused on perfectionism, and I was so scared of failure. And so for me, gaining weight didn't make me more confident in that direct association, like, or direct kind of cause and effect way. But as my body image improved, as I gained weight and got my cycle back and felt more comfortable in myself, I felt more confident going into things. I also think I like the question of like, well, what's the worst case here? Like, worst case is you don't get the job. Like, you don't lose anything. You just don't get that job. Like, nothing has to change. And it's like, oh, well, could I live with that worst case scenario of not getting this job and then going for a different job and getting that one instead? You probably could. So like, what have you got to lose? And the final thing is something that I'm going to have a visa interview at some point, and I'm already nervous for that. And I've not been like nervous like this weirdly for a while, and already I'm like, okay, I can feel what's happening in my body as the nerves come up. So thinking about strategies you can use to self-soothe in the moment. So again, a classic one I'll use for presentations is putting my hand on my heart, or if I can't do that mid-presentation, if I'm doing a big talk, I'll put my hand on my forearm, like on my other forearm, and just to bring myself, like to ground myself, to remind me to take breaths, to remind me to be mindful, and just brings me back to the present moment. And the final thing is celebrating failure. Like I can't like obviously for the last 6 months or year, that's been a big focus for me of reframing how I see failure. And for me, when I think of failure now, I really do try and celebrate it as learning something or challenging myself or doing something brave, as opposed to like something negative, because you have to fail, otherwise you're never going to get anywhere. And if that's not getting a job, then think what you can learn from it or what experience you get from it.
Like, I was just thinking on the flip side of what you were saying, kind of on the like, what's the worst that could happen, and reframing failure. I was working through kind of limiting beliefs with a client and coming up with like statements that she can challenge when she is kind of caught up in that moment. And one of hers, which I thought was brilliant, and it's probably one that I am going to be using myself, was like, why not me? Like, why shouldn't I be able to go ahead and interview for this job and potentially even get it? Why wouldn't it be me? Because you're a fantastic person. So yeah, I like that one. And I was thinking in the moment as well, strategy wise, like making sure that you are breathing still, because I know if you're anything like me, and it's something I've been really mindful of this week, is that I've been definitely like breathing just, I can feel it, like not even into my chest, I think like just below my neck. I'm like, oh my God. So take some nice deep breaths. But you have a worry ring, right? And I thought, Emilia, do you have?
No,
like,
Emma does.
ring?
No, Emma does, and she loves a wee spin of it.
Yeah, I was going to say something like that maybe would be, again, something nice. That my go-to would be a hair tie, but probably not ideal in a interview. So maybe something like that you can just kind of use to ground yourself. That would be my go-to.
I think what I like about this client is they've said that they know they're capable, so they already know they can do it and they're a good candidate. And I mean, some it's different to you, but Emilia, kind of similar. I don't know if you remember this, when I was working with you, I had my first exam for my master's nutrition course, and I had a panic attack like in the exam. So like I sat down, and as soon as they said, right, you can turn the pages over and you can begin, my Fitbit was like, are you running right now? And I was like, no, I'm sat down, and I was dripping in sweat. And I got through the exam like by the skin of my teeth. But I remember talking to you about it, and you were like, okay, like some box breathing would be great. And I started practicing box breathing in my lectures. I would do it before my exams, and then I would take it into my exam with me. And before I turn the page over, like I would do like a round of box breathing, and then I would read the question, and then I would breathe again, and then I would answer it. And it was never a case of like, oh, I don't think I can do it, or I don't think I can get through it. I knew that I'd done the revision, but it was that classic, you go in and your mind goes blank, and you come out and you're like, oh, I remember all the answers now. And it was just the pressure of the situation. So having something that helps you to feel grounded, like in the moment, can be really helpful. And the last thing, really, Emilia, I'm just wondering if we can swap one of your meditation sessions for an ETM class on our Facebook page, because I would be down for joining in with you teaching an aerobics class.
Absolutely not. I was like, what's an ETM class? Which says a lot. It's never going to happen, ever. There's certain songs that are ingrained in my head that I just think, if I like, what is it? Release Me, Agnes. That was a classic.
I can teach aerobics. Like I really enjoyed that part of my course. Like it was my favorite thing. And then once I qualified, I didn't teach for like 5 years, couldn't need to. And then one day, like an instructor just couldn't turn up, and I was like, okay, just gonna grab a CD and see what happens and just wait for it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I used to do like the really fast one of like the equivalent was like body attack, I think, of the Les Mills ones. It was wild. Okay, fab. Anna, question.
If you guys could only ever do one exercise for the rest of your days, what would it be?
Ooh, question.
Like one actual exercise or like one type of exercise?
It doesn't specify, so I will leave it open to interpretation.
If it was one type of exercise, mine would probably be, I'm not including walking in this because I just count that as just general movement, would be resistance training. Not because I love it the most, just because it would be the best thing for my health. And then One exercise would probably be probably RDLs, I think.
Oh,
No.
snap. I
Oh,
also do
really?
RDLs. Yeah, because you get upper back, mid back, like shoulders, glutes, hamstrings. Only really quads that aren't getting a huge amount of stimulus, but even then, you're still using them.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But then maybe I think leg press or something's probably more sensible.
I was just going to go conventional deadlift.
I can't do them. My hernias are no. I'm not a fan of deadlifts. I'm quite jealous. I
No.
think that's smart.
But I think agreed on resistance training regardless. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Although I would really miss cycling because I love cycling. But yeah, for ultimate health, if I can only do one thing, I guess I'm committing to RDLs for life.
Massive hamstrings.
Massive hand. But I'm also like, I'm not going to lie to you, it's functional, but it's also aesthetics. Like if I could only train one muscle for like, or one muscle group forever, it'd be my glutes. Like I'm not going to pretend to be deeper than that. But I also think that's important for posture. And it's just, yeah.
And back health.
Yeah. Meh. Okay. I have been much more aware of people's energy and how I feel after some social interactions. I'm noticing that some friends I just don't want to be around, not feeling heard, seen, fear, or being judged, that kind of thing. I know they're all projections of my own stuff, but for the last couple of interactions, I'm out of sorts for hours afterwards. I've walked away from lots of friendships and people, so it's not that I am afraid to walk away from situations that no longer serve me. But I guess my question is around navigating friendships as we grow and weighing up the impact of being alone versus being around the wrong people on our health and well-being.
Oh. One thing I would question was, is it just a projection of your own stuff, or is it genuine stuff that's going on that isn't okay? And in that sense, you have every right to walk away. And I think classic reframe, rather than worrying about potentially some alone time, like this is a really great time to find people that actually like you want to be around and make you feel good, and potentially doing some different things to help find you those people.
And I think also sometimes our mind goes to like worst case scenario of if I don't have these people in my life, then I will be alone, and being alone is like the worst thing ever. But worst case scenario isn't really ever going to happen because you're never going to not meet new people for the rest of your life. And sometimes it is just like you said, you outgrow certain relationships and then you find new ones. And I think something I read, oh, don't judge me for like being like Instagram therapy thing, but I read it on Instagram, and it was one of those things where it's like not just looking at like romantic relationships but also friendships as well, and the idea that the end of a friendship is like a bad thing, whereas you have different friendships at different times in your life for different reasons, and like people come and go, and not like they serve a purpose, but as in like your relationship with that other person serves a purpose. Like at that point you both have a need and you get on really well for whatever reason, and then as you grow in different directions you kind of move on and find new friendships. And I think that's a really nice way to frame it, because it's very easy to feel like bad about yourself and thinking there's something wrong with you, like you said, am I just projecting, or actually has that friendship kind of run its course and now you're ready for the next chapter of your life and the new people in your life as well, like you're going to find new people.
So I'm going to completely disagree with you too. I don't disagree with you too. I think that those are both important. But realistically, if your fear of being judged, you feel like you're not being heard, like I would say actually have the conversation and don't just automatically go into this Gen Z narrative of like, well, if something's not serving you, just cut them off. I don't like that narrative, because I think realistically, there are going to be seasons of your life and different relationships where that relationship is supporting you and that relationship is not supporting you, and you're supporting that relationship and you're not, and that is going to be transient potentially. And I've got friendships where I've been friends with these people since I was maybe 16, and we've had years where we haven't really spoken, and then years where we've been really close and I feel really connected to them, and then you know, it comes in and out, and that's not, and I wouldn't cut those friendships off because they're not serving me, or because I don't feel great every single time I hang out with them, especially if it's coming from me feeling like I worry about being around them because I worry about being judged. I think you're right to think about, is it my own self-projection, and is it my own stuff? And in that sense, it is something that you want to work through. I'm being a little bit facetious here, because I totally do agree with both of what you're saying in terms of like knowing when things are time to call things, right? For sure. I just think that we are these days a bit quick to sort of say, well, I don't like that, so I'm not going to do it. And I think that can lead us to disconnection, because we'd rather do that than have a hard, vulnerable conversation with someone that we love and say, I don't feel really like when we're together that you're really like hearing what I'm saying. I feel like when I try and speak to you about my stuff, you bring it back to yourself, or I feel like when I try and speak to you, you're maybe distracted with other things. Is that fair for me to say? And is there something that we can do to try and like communicate or like rectify that? And it's interesting because I think we do this a lot more with friends than we do with relationships, especially as women. We're like, especially in heteronormative relationships, we're like, I'm going to make this relationship work regardless. And it's toxic as hell. And we're like, yeah, but if we just change this and we just change that. And then when it comes to work or when it comes to friendships, we're like, nope, that doesn't serve me. I'm off. I'll see you later. And that's really, really unhelpful for so many reasons. We stay in shit romantic relationships, and we ruin some potentially really strong connections that we have. So I think just being aware of, like, is it a fear of judgment, in which case that's stuff for you to work on? Is it actually that whenever you hang out, they literally don't ask you a single question about yourself at all, and you just come away feeling drained, in which case, can you have that conversation? Or is it just because you're a little bit introverted and actually being around people does drain your energy, and what you're doing is you're going to meet someone, you're taking on all of their stuff, and you're not creating enough space for yourself to restore your energy, so you're blaming that person, when really it's just about navigating the time that you spend with people, how much time you spend with people, whether that's big groups or small, like 1 or 2 people at a time, the environment that you spend time with, and how much time you're spending on yourself to restore that. So there's not a clear answer, I don't think, in my head. I think you just have to really look at realistically what's going on, and is this something that I want to fight for? And has it been something that I think in the past would have been worth fighting for? And if so, like, how am I going to do that?
Okay. Okay, opinions as experts help a coach out. Are some clients just uncoachable? No matter the strategies I use, I have one client who does 0% in terms of behavior change each week, but still wants coaching. I am at a loss. I have tried so many techniques to love this client forward. Anything I suggest is too little, and the big changes she wants just don't happen for her. She has an all or nothing mindset and is stuck in the past. We talk about this every week. Not one behavior change has been implemented, and she is upset that the scale hasn't changed, even though I'm a weight neutral coach for the most part, and told her this would not be a focus. Anyway, I have the mind that it must be me. I haven't found the right plan or the way to reach her. But is it?
It might be you. By the way, I'm not even in my luteal phase.
Just picking up on Lynn's sassy pregnant hormones.
That's what it is. No, it might be that you haven't found the right way to support her yet, and it might be that she's not in a place ready to change yet. It could be, or it could be a combination of the two. But even if it is that you haven't found the right way to support her yet, that's not a failure on your part. That's what coaching is navigating all the different ways of supporting someone and finding out the best way to support that person. So you're not failing, you're just discovering the right way to support someone. But on the flip side, yeah, if you think about the trans-theoretical model of change, some people are kind of in that contemplation phase, and they'll maybe dip their toe into signing up to do some change, but maybe they're not quite there yet. But I think it is important to remember that for a lot of people, they have made the commitment to sign up. And, you know, we work with people who start with us and then they say, do you know what, I don't want to do this. This isn't for me. Like, that does happen. And usually those people will come back and work with us a year later or 6 months later, not always, because it's a scary thing. So I think I would say a couple of things. Practically, I would ask her and say, okay, well, what do you feel this week you can commit to? You tell me, if you pick one nutrition habit, one behavior habit, and maybe one exercise thing, what 3 things can you commit to? And are you sure you can fit that into your schedule? Okay, let's make that promise to yourself. That's what you're going to do. And letting her lead it. Autonomy is so important with coaching. And I actually had this conversation with a client yesterday where we were laughing about it, because I was like, you realize I've not given you any advice in this. I'm just going to keep asking you questions, because she's like, I want to do more. I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, but why? And like, we don't come up with solutions. We'll support people and we give resources and homeworks and we'll direct people, right? But autonomy in the coaching process is so important, and we know it leads to greater weight loss, greater behavior change, etc. Right? So it's really about how can you support her to be autonomous in her decision making, and make those promises to herself, because this is what she wants. Another thing to consider is, realistically, there's a reason that she doesn't want to change. What is it that's keeping her where she is? And having that conversation with her too. Like, ask her, what is the reason that you want to stay where you are? Or what do you think is a pull to stay where you are? And she'll probably say, well, nothing, I don't want to be where I am. But there is something. It's like with binge eating, classic example of, we often don't want to give up binge eating, even though objectively we do, because it's our friend, it's our comfort, it's our coping strategy, it's our protector. So we don't want to give it up. That's really, really common. So you kind of have to have that conversation with her and say, like, what do you think, what positive roles, what's the benefit of staying where you are, and identifying that. And then also thinking about, how does any of this stuff align with what's important to her? I'm sure you've had the values conversation, but really have a call with her and say, like what are your values, and how does staying where you are and having these habits align with your values, and how does making these changes align with your values? Because maybe right now that's not necessarily clear, and she's doing things for weight loss and she's not seeing weight loss. And so even though you might be a weight neutral coach, if that's always been her marker of success and her outcome has always been focused on weight loss, and that's not changing, she's not going to be motivated. So she needs to understand, or she needs to start getting curious, and you need to support her and getting more curious about the importance of like the work that she's doing now, the various outcomes that you can look at now, and why that is important to her in terms of her values.
And so I had a check-in this week on Monday, and my reply was just full of questions. And then on Tuesday we had a call and we were chatting about something very similar. And it's something that we probably see as a team in the first couple of weeks, maybe the first couple of months of working with someone, is most check-ins will say like, oh, I don't feel like I'm doing enough, I feel like I should be doing more. And we just explore that. And I think I just asked her a few questions around like, well, what is enough? And what you think is enough, is that sustainable right now with the long-term lifestyle that you want to be moving towards based on where you are right now? Like, what's realistic within your week? What are your expectations of what you feel like you should be doing versus what actually is manageable right now? And then actually I sent her one of the podcasts I think that we did around the challenges that our clients face at first, which usually is feeling like they want more and more and more, when actually they're struggling to kind of get these basics in. And then we started our call and she was just absolutely laughing her head off, and she was like, yeah, I don't know why I thought I needed to be doing like these 50 things. She was like, I'm just going to focus on this one thing this week because I can see how that's going to support me this week, how that's going to help me build next week. And we just kind of talked through like what she thought was the best kind of action short term to move her towards where she wants to be like long term. And I think when you're coaching, I've definitely done this before, like so many times, you feel like you have to give the answer because you want to show like value, like that's what I'm here for. But most of the time actually just kind of holding up that mirror and kind of saying, well, this is where you are right now, like what's realistic. And then like you said, Emilia, letting that client create their own plan, like have their autonomy, can be really helpful, because then they have control and they feel empowered rather than feeling like they're waiting for the answer from you.
Okay, George's question, correct?
It is, yeah. And it's from one of my clients. So I'd love to hear more about why people experience all or nothing tendencies in life and habits, and how to manage all or nothing tendencies in life, not necessarily related to food.
It's kind of like a cognitive distortion. So it's this way of thinking that we develop from probably from childhood, which is obviously unhelpful to us in some way. It's like black and white thinking, and it can stem from loads of different things, and I'm not here to kind of diagnose over a podcast like why you may have developed all or nothing thinking, but it's usually comes from the perfectionist mindset, and the perfectionist mindset usually comes from an inherent feeling of not being worthy as we are, often, not always, and we think if we do everything better, and especially when we're younger and we're celebrated for achievements and we're celebrated when things go right as opposed to when things are maybe going wrong or more challenging, we start to realize that we're to get the better that we do. And so when that's combined with like this perfectionist mindset, or this can then create a perfectionist mindset of, okay, well, if I just do everything really, really, really well, then I'll get all of this external validation that I need, and I'll finally feel like I'm doing everything right, and then I'll finally feel like I'm enough. And then what happens is that if you have one slight deviation from what you think is the best way of doing things, you feel guilt and you feel shame because it's not optimal and it's not perfect. And as a result of that guilt and shame, you then kind of fall into the nothing mentality of like, let's just screw it all because I can't do it well enough is perfect and I can't do it well enough, so why bother at all? We don't create that space for saying, well, 80% is actually really, really great, and that's actually what we're looking for. We're like, it's either perfect or it's crap. And so again, it can be stem from so many different like values and stories that we are fed when we're younger, and unintentionally, not through any blame of any caregiver, and everyone is different in that. But I think it's also exacerbated by like capitalist narratives and hustle culture and patriarchy and all of these things that combine to kind of tell us that the more we do, the better we are. The more we earn, the better we are. The prettier we look, the leaner we are. All of these narratives that say more and more and more is better, that just exacerbates this perfectionist mindset and this need to just do more and more. And then again, a slight deviation, it's like, nope, like that's not good enough at all. So that confirms my narrative that I'm not enough. I may as well not try and do anything at all.
Yeah, most definitely. I think in terms of challenging it, we've spoken about this loads of times, and that's implementing imperfect action. Like, start as small as you need, but get comfortable with things not being 100% all of the time. And I thought of a new one today when I was at the gym. And did I take a photo just to document that I was at the gym? Yes. But my one today was doing, I think it was like 5 minutes 6 as my warm-up rather than 5 minutes. And like, I was thinking, I was like, past me would have done 6 minutes. And I was like, no, past you would have done 10, because 6 is just meh. It's like neither here nor there. I was like, well, that's a cool win. I can do that. And it was only because there was a decent song playing at the gym. I was like, I'll listen to this and then I'll move on. But things like that give you that little feeling of discomfort, and then see how that then kind of infiltrates into other areas and how you feel a bit more flexible around food or in social situations and things like that.
Agree. Okay, how do you set and stick to boundaries? I find it difficult to set a boundary, as I find it difficult to gauge if I'm being too hard or too soft. This applies to both my relationship with my partner and my children. I seem to doubt myself and never appear consistent.
I would say, as a general rule, if you have those worries, that it's not that you're going too hard with the boundaries. There is, Becca did it, didn't she? The resource on boundaries. Am I right in saying that? But there is an excellent resource on setting boundaries and kind of understanding where your boundaries lie, and maybe areas of life that you do need to be a little bit firmer, or there is a bit of flexibility with them. That would be a really good one to work through, I'd say.
That's a great point, and this is my client, so I will 100% recommend her to do this boundary resource. So thank you for that. I think the question kind of is, does it matter if it's too hard or too soft in the context of what you're trying to achieve, in that your boundary is there to support your relationship, your boundary is there to support your space, your energy, to allow like a healthful connection, right? If that has a positive outcome on that, if that has a positive effect on the desired outcome, then it's quote unquote the right level of boundary, whatever that really looks like. If people don't change their behaviors and it's a valid boundary to set, which again I suppose is part of the question, you know yourself with common sense, if you're saying to your children, don't ever drop food on the floor ever again, like, you know that's never going to happen. But if you're saying to your kids, don't eat dinner in front of the TV, we're going to have it at dinner table, that's a valid boundary, right? That's just common sense. But if you say, okay, we're going to eat dinner, we're going to a table every night, and your kids continue to eat it in front of the TV and ignore you, then that is too soft, right? Because the outcome is not meeting the desired outcome. So I don't think there's an answer of like too hard or too soft, in the sense of, is that boundary serving the purpose that it's supposed to serve, which is usually fostering a stronger connection or preserving your space. And I think sometimes, especially if we're people pleasers, we don't think protecting ourselves is a valid reason for a boundary. And so then we think, well, is it too hard? Because really it's only serving myself. But there's nothing like only about serving yourself that's still important. It's not a selfish thing. Unless, of course, you're saying, I'm not going to cook dinner for my children who are 5 years old for the next 2 weeks because I need to preserve my time and do my yoga session tonight. Again, common sense. It's like, that obviously wouldn't be correct, so to speak. Oh, maybe it is for your family. Maybe your 5-year-old is like Matilda and can, I don't know, magic up her own dinner. I don't know. So yeah, I don't think there's a clear one. I think notice how you feel after setting it. Like, do you feel guilty because you people please often, and can you sit with that guilt and know that that's just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong? Or do you feel resentful because actually people haven't managed to stick to that boundary, and so maybe you need to work on how you communicate it or the outcome of that boundary?
I also just think, to kind of add on that a little bit, like, sometimes it's down to what you think a boundary is for. Like, sometimes there's this misconception that a boundary is a rule, and it's a rule that is like, self-serving only. But when you're setting a boundary, you're communicating clarity, your expectations in a relationship, like what you expect from somebody else, and also like what they can expect from you. And when you're clear, you're being really kind. Like, you can't, I'm just using this example, I'm not saying this is correct, but like, you can't let your kids eat in front of the TV and drop food all over the floor and run around mashing beans into the carpet and then get annoyed at them if you've never said to them, this isn't okay, this is what we're going to do instead. But if you give them that boundary, that clarity of expectation, then they understand if they're doing something that actually is going to frustrate you or is, not actually what you want. So yes, it's helping you, but it's, like you said, it's building connection. It's helping your relationship with your children or with your partner or with your friend or whoever. And I think sometimes just understanding that can help take away some of that guilt, because we feel like, oh, I'm just kind of getting bossy and telling people what to do. And it's like, well, no, the other side is that actually you are creating a much healthier relationship, so people know what's okay and what isn't okay, and what's crossing the line and what isn't.
Agree.
It's me, isn't it? I was like, just about
I
to
think
start.
I think we switch halfway, maybe. Either way, I don't know. Anna, go for it. I think it's you now.
I'll go regardless. I feel sometimes I'm just doing stuff to tick a box rather than feeling the outcome. Like with body functionality / appreciation, I list and say thank you to my body, but I don't always feel it.
I mean, I don't know if box ticking is a bad thing. Like, sometimes you do have to just tick a box to build a habit and to build a behavior, and not saying like it's a fake it till you make it kind of thing, but sometimes you do need to do the thing so that the thing becomes something that you just do without overthinking it. And sometimes it's like, well, why am I doing that thing? If you're going to the gym, even though you don't feel like it and you're just ticking off getting 2 or 3 sessions done, great, because you're still going to improve your health. You're still going to have the outcomes that you want. So if it's a case of feeling super driven to do it or doing it just to tick the box, like, I think my opinion would be like, is that really the end of the world?
I agree to some degree, to a large degree, in that sometimes you will have to tick a box. And we talk about this a lot with like resistance training and stuff. Sometimes for us, resistance training is just ticking a box, or sometimes going for a walk is ticking a box and you don't want to do it, but you're doing it because your future self will thank you for it. But I think that that's not a long-term strategy. If you were ticking a body gratitude box for 2 years and after 2 years you still didn't feel that gratitude into your body, then that would be a bit of an orange flag of something to look at. Because the intention behind something is really important. And when you're box ticking, sometimes the intention is to support your future self, and sometimes you're box ticking to get a gold star from Anna when you check in the next week. And again, initially, early on in this journey, that's quite common, and you just want to do everything right because you're a high achiever and maybe a bit of a perfectionist, and so you want to do all those things. But that's not necessarily going to serve you in getting the most, like, that's not going to be a long-term strategy, because Anna won't be there forever, and then it comes, well, why would I still bother doing this? So I think checking in with why, like, what's the purpose of that body functionality work? What's the purpose of finding other ways to be grateful for your body aside from the way that it looks? Why are you doing that? That's an important question to ask yourself. And then I also think, like, what is it that's stopping you from feeling into it? So when I would do body functionality work, I tend to do it at the end of a yoga session. And when I'm in Shavasana, I will just run through my body quickly and just be like, thanks for letting me do this. And whatever words come out of my mouth, it's generally those words. It doesn't matter what they are, right? That's my time to really do that. And I imagine my words going to every little finger and I say little finger, I've got giant long fingers, but imagine the words that I'm saying in my head going to like all the different parts of my body, and I really visualize that. And the reason for that is because I want to support my body image. The reason for that is because I don't want to develop a negative relationship with my body ever again, because I know what that feels like. So when it comes to you checking the box, it's like, you need to think about, what is your purpose? What's the purpose of this? And like, is that actually something that you want? Like, do you want to improve your body image? And if not, then that's not something that you're going to want to do, and then don't tick the box and don't do it, because it's a waste of your time. But if it is, it's like, well, why am I so reluctant to do it? Why am I so reluctant to feel appreciation from my body? Is it because actually I'm scared if I feel appreciation from my body, then I won't want to change it anymore? Or something else? So I think really getting to grips with why you have that reservation. Or is it because actually you don't really understand, and actually you're not on board with that because it feels a little bit too airy-fairy for you, and that's something else to work on.
I was thinking whether it's, I mean, this client she shares her lists of body appreciations. They are exceptional, but I'm wondering whether, what's the word, like running through a list. Okay, so why don't you pare it back and just think of one thing that you are truly grateful for, rather than, well, I have to do all of these different parts for the body functionality for it to be enough. No, let's just pull it back and find something really deep and meaningful that you can connect with, and almost think, like, sometimes we fall into that mindset with exercise that it's something that you have to do. No, it's something that you get to do. And obviously what both of you were saying is like connecting with the purpose and why you're doing it. Well, I'm doing this to support my body image. Okay, so let me find something that I really am super grateful for, super appreciative that my body has allowed me to do, supported me to do that day, and take some pressure off in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. That's such a good insight. I think it's sometimes you start with the granular stuff of like, I'm really appreciative for my lungs for gas exchange and all these things, and you get really granular about it. But once you've kind of got that awareness, then just taking a step back and being like, oh, I'm really grateful for my body for allowing this. That's enough. as long as you understand like the deeper stuff behind it. So you're totally right. Maybe it's time to just then take a step back a little bit. Georgia, is it you? I think it's you.
I went, then Anna went. So I think it's you, but I'm happy to go again if you want me to.
Just go for it. Go for it.
Who knows anymore?
So I'll just keep going. This is one of my clients. So I'm curious on food and FOMO. For example, we have, excuse me, I've lost my mouth. We have a buffet breakfast here, and I always feel this desire to have as many different foods as possible. Like I'll miss out if I don't try it. I reflected on this each day regarding my emotions and my mood, and if I was happy, stressed, annoyed, relaxed, and it didn't seem to matter. I always wanted to have a food in case I miss out.
Okay. I'm not sure what the question is, but
just insight, I think.
Okay. It's not emotional eating. So it's great that you're looking before you eat, you're checking in with your emotions to see what you feel like. It's not emotional eating, it's scarcity around food because you might not have it again. And to some degree with a buffet, you're right. It might not be there tomorrow. But this ties in line with unconditional permission to eat. It's something that we see at Christmas, Easter, times like this where food genuinely is scarce and you don't get year round. This is often when unconditional permission to eat is challenged because it's like, well, I know that I can have it anytime I want, but realistically, I might not have the opportunity to have it again, so I want it now. And that's valid. If something is truly delicious, if that was like a freshly cooked cinnamon bun, hot, on a hotel buffet, the chances are I would have that every day for a week because I don't know when I would have it again. But even that, after about 3 days, I'd probably be a bit like kind of over it a little bit. But the novelty of it, once you've had a mouthful of it, is probably going to dissipate unless it's something great. So what I would probably do is share that cinnamon bun with whoever I was with at the hotel buffet. Maybe not the first day, but certainly after that, and then supplement it with some eggs and some fruit and some vegetables. I'll probably do that anyway. So if it's something that you think is truly delicious, have a bit of it and have more of it if you really, really love it. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But recognize that it's probably after the first time not going to be something that you're so desperate for to have again. And the novelty will probably wear it off. I think sometimes we look for deeper meaning for things, and most people have a little bit of FOMO at a breakfast buffet. But I also think too, when you truly get to the place of unconditional permission to eat, and then you go to a breakfast buffet, you realise that a lot of the time the stuff at the breakfast buffet is actually not great. And that dry croissant, you've only got FOMO for that because you don't let yourself have the delicious fresh croissant when you go to a bakery down the street. So hotel buffets, I mean, some of them are great, but some of them are crap. And if you've got FOMO for the crap, I say crap food colloquially, you know what I mean, no food is crap, but I mean a dry croissant, for example. If you've got FOMO of that, then think about your unconditional permission to eat outside of it. But if you've got FOMO for a hot cinnamon bun or your favourite food, it's pretty valid because you don't have them often.
Do you know what I love about buffets? Like just watching, particularly breakfast ones, just watching people from like all across the world, like, what are you having for breakfast? Obviously making no judgments, but I'm like, never thought of that combination. Do I want to try it? Probs not. I'll stick with one.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. You go.
Yeah, you're set because you automatically go for the same stuff of like, maybe I'll have some Greek yogurt, maybe I'll have a little bit of cereal and then some toast, and then it's like, oh, they've got cheese and eggs and olives and I don't know, a croissant.
Okay, pal.
Oh, do you know, just the love of just buffet. Oh, there's one in that my friend Louise and I go to every year in Kos where we go together, and they have a whole breakfast cart of different dried fruits, but like dried papaya, dried figs and everything like that, and then like fig jam, and oh my gosh, all the different seeds. It's just heavenly. Oh, I really want that now. Okay, moving on.
So hungry now.
I'm
just like filled up with water, like, no, calm down.
Oh, that sounds
Cinnabon would be great right now.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Emilia.
Sorry. Rosalind's question, last question. What practice or positive reinforcement can I carry out to prevent my kind, I think it means mind, so I'm going to start again. What practice or positive reinforcement can I carry out to prevent my mind from automatically thinking more food equals weight gain?
That's a great question.
I don't think there's a practice or a positive reinforcement in this situation. I think there might be that I can't think of right now, but I don't think it's the answer. I think the answer is education and experience. So thinking about what, like, realistically, you could have more food and it's a giant bowl of lettuce or a nut or two nuts. More food is the giant bowl of lettuce, but it's not going to lead to a calorie surplus. But two nuts probably won't lead to a calorie surplus.
I was going to say,
you get the idea. It's more calorie dense. You get the idea, okay? So I think part of it is just educating yourself around food, and sometimes I think when we come from more of a perfectionist mindset, we automatically think that understanding foods and macronutrients and things can be quite toxic to that, because we can become like kind of addicted and obsessed with knowing the numbers. But actually, I think sometimes when you have this type of mindset where you struggle with thinking that all food is going to lead you to weight gain, sometimes empowering yourself with the knowledge that that's not going to happen, and how foods can nourish you in other ways is actually really, really helpful. And so I think focusing less on the calories of foods and more about maybe it's macronutrients or maybe it's micronutrients, thinking about, well, how do these two nuts, like what micronutrients are in these two nuts, and how do they nourish me, and thinking less about food volume and food calories and more about food nourishment and food micronutrients and nutrients is a much more helpful way to do it. And I think also too, the experience of actually eating a little bit more and recognizing what actually happens when you do that is important. But then I also think on the top of that, and I don't know your situation, but recognizing that weight gain is not inherently a bad thing for a lot of people. For most people, it's not a bad thing, and it doesn't have a moral value, and really getting to grips with why weight gain is such a negative in your mind. And again, I don't know your situation, so I don't know if body fat levels are impacting your health in some way, but weight gain is not inherently a bad thing, and that's often a narrative that we tell ourselves based on society and culture and things like that, when realistically for a lot of people, weight gain can improve your hormonal profile, it can improve your mood, it can improve your energy, it can improve your cognition, it can improve your body image, so many things. But we tell ourselves that none of those things are going to happen. So like, get curious about that too.
I think sometimes one of my favorite things to oh yeah, I was muted, apologies.
Sorry, I muted you, Georgia. I'm really sorry.
Not a problem.
It wasn't because I wasn't interested in your answer, I promise.
Quiet, Georgia.
Well,
what was I saying? Oh yeah, so some of my clients in menopause, like one of my favorite things to work on with them is educating them around like the benefits of having unsaturated fats in their diet, because so many of the women that I work with have spent years and years and years on a low fat diet, and they fear, like you said, eating more food because they think of really food about weight, and kind of not really anything outside of that. I'm struggling for words. And when we start to think about how unsaturated fats help with heart health, particularly once we are post-menopause, there becomes a health element to it that they really enjoy and really get into. And then beyond that as well, like when they're actually eating to feel good, they have this energy, they go to the gym because they have the energy to do it, they have these more intense workouts, they want to walk more, they have more energy for work, for their kids, and they forget about the fact that they had this fear previously of like, well, fat's bad or eating more food is bad. And like I said, it comes back to a bit of education and then evidence as well, like eating the food and seeing what happens and getting curious about how it affects your body, whether that's weight gain or not weight gain, but actually like what happens when I eat these foods, how do I feel? I find that really exciting. I don't know about you guys, but I do get very into like, let's talk about fats.
I'm not sure if I get that excited about talking about fats. But
I think it's just that I really like I like nuts. I like avocados, I like eggs and stuff. I'm like, look at all this good stuff you're going to get to eat that you've just been missing out on for years.
I know, they are great.
Really.
That is, like what you were saying, Georgia, that is the one thing I think so many people, when they've come from a history of dieting or restriction, or like fats are always, even when they've done so much work on their relationship with food, fats are always the one that they're like, just kind of stay in the background a little bit, when actually when you start to include a bit more, then they're like, oh, I'm actually satisfied with meals. Oh, I just needed a spoon of peanut butter and that's made my breakfast like 10 times more satisfying, and I can go 3 hours without thinking about food. Like small things like that. Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Okay, thanks everyone for your questions. Keep them coming in. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.